because now we're going to look at both Workgrid and Beezy's sort of product in more detail. And so first up is Brett. So Brett, can we have a look and see? I mean, you're going to talk about managing change and mastering the new way of work. But first of all, can we start off on the back of Keely's question there, really? Can we start off with you giving us a high-level description of what Workgrid does?
Certainly. Workgrid's an interesting story because we're born out of solving exactly what Clay's talking about. The diversity of all the interactions that you have with systems, and not just your social and your communication aspects, but also taking into account the vastness of systems you interact with across the enterprise, whether it be down to business, right? There's all these moments of truth that employees have, and the frustration of the enterprise topography today really is, how we force users into having to know to go to the system, log in, go 6 screens deep to do simple tasks. And when you kind of boil it down, a lot of those systems in the enterprise were created and to basically so the power users in a design perspective with very little consideration for user experience. So our platform is all about that employee experience layer that can sit across the top of those and allow for flexibility to integrate those integrations into a seamless user experience. I know we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but I think it came up a lot in that employees don't care. they don't care about the system or whatever. They care about getting things done. So we provide a product that allows people to integrate with both internet and meet employees where they are, whether it's mobile or on the desktop, but bring the work to where the employee is. But beyond that, bring in the personalization aspects and content and things that are meaningful to an employee. So, what we've seen a lot in enterprises and digital employee experience is that one size fits all type mentality, which really isn't. We still talk about personas and all that. It really doesn't match that. It's really leveraging the data and things you have about your employee from a platform perspective to be able to integrate that across the enterprise and bring meaningful information, meaningful channels, be able to transact, so a productivity perspective beyond just communications, being able to get things done in a much easier and simplified fashion.
Thanks for that. That's really good, just to give us that flavor really of what Workgrid can do. So now we'll go back to our topic slightly, and you're looking at it through Workgrid's lens. So what do you see as the biggest shift in DEX as organizations sort of prepare for this return and shift back to work?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think there's a major shift in DEX, but more an acceleration. As COVID-19 has been somewhat of a shot in the arm to organizations to now prioritize it even higher. I think the trends over the last few years, even preceding the impact of the pandemic, showed a marginally increased focus on employee experience. I mean, albeit for different reasons. I mean, I think the drivers there were consumer-driven things, recruiting, retention, and modernization. But I don't think it's, again, a drastic change. It's more of an acceleration. Now, with remote work escalating, all of the digital touch points become remote, right? So to ensure productivity, engagement, connectivity, and that they're getting all of that right information at the right time, really now has become table stakes. So I think organizations are really going to need to broaden their DX strategy to be able to meet employees where they are, because the world is changing, and they can't just provide the services as they've done before in the manner of the past. They're going to have to provide experiences that are truly more personalized and a little more employee-centric. Now, employees, as we've seen for this, and again, this is leading up to this, not necessarily a result of current state and the massive shift to remote work, but it's about the multi-experience, creating individualized experience based on every employee's needs. Frontline workers very different than desk workers, and they interact with technologies different. One might be more mobile, one might not even have desktop access. So this goes back to, again, the employee journeys and the personas, but I think the strategy is going to become much more broad than it was in our core sort of internet view of the past. Now, as it return to work more specifically, in the just returning to work, companies went from an office sort of mentality, and we're seeing the rise of remote work even before this, but now we're a completely dispersed workforce. We talk about being in 4 offices with 4,000 employees. We now have 4,000 offices. They're all our own. And so things are going to be driven by more localized influences because of COVID-19. And most likely, if you look at how employees are going to go back to work, it's going to be staggered, and it's going to be based on a lot of very new variables that just didn't exist before, that need to be applied to maintain both aspects of like safety and awareness for employees.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing some of these impacts of getting back to normal now. I think with schools and universities, you can kind of see that trend happening. It's most likely to be the same challenges for businesses as they get back. And they're going to need new strategies and new ways of leveraging digital channels to both communicate with employees and also bring in services that are going to be needed to keep employees safe. So example is we've been working with one of our customers and on integrating aspects of things like wellness checks, and then how does contact tracing play into the digital landscape, and how can that be supported as part of their digital strategy to get back to the office.
Did you have some visuals that you were going to share with us today, some slides?
I do. I think I was going to share those a bit later, but I can hop over to those now if you'd like.
No, that's fine. That's fine. If you're not ready, that's okay. I just wanted to check in.
I'll go ahead and share my screen. Just let me know when you can see this.
Yep.
And all right, everybody see my screen?
Yep, that's good. I don't know if you want to put it onto the start of the slide, but
Oh,
it
okay,
looks good.
I'll switch there.
We can see full PowerPoint just now.
I'm just going to run through some quick examples of sort of what we're seeing as far as
Okay.
the impacts of COVID-19. What you're seeing here is just typical of anybody's standard intranet, but what we provide is more from the communications perspective. What we provide is more of the pointing to targeted communications, because what you're seeing now is communications are different between offices, have different impacts based on region where they are, and certainly as you follow the data from the CDC and various hotspots, and so the impacts are different. So the communication patterns have to be different when you're communicating to the workers via COVID-19. It's not sort of one size fits all. But also being able to implement things where you're really reaching out to your employees, whether it be surveys and pulse surveys. This remote work arrangement piece is actually is very critical. As we saw people now, as it started, you started to see we didn't know how long this was going to last. So now as more home offices become permanent, how do you manage ergo type things for your employees? So various use cases to keep the pulse and reach out and connect with employees.
What's that there? That's just to go a bit slower, just on that bit. So that's a. Oh, right. Okay. So I see. That's a survey where you're asking people what they have and what they need. So yeah. Okay. So that's like a little check-in with people. That looks great. Yeah, I see what
and then even on the wellness side, right, being able to support some of those things that are important, because I think when this all happened, you saw a lot of the focus be on first, let's get connectivity, make sure people can effectively work from home just from a network perspective. But then a huge focus on communication strategies and campaigns around, are you okay, and how are you feeling supported in the connectivity. So, and even in cases like where now you're hiring folks from an onboarding perspective, like the hiring aspect is done completely remote. So how do you bring all those things into a unified experience to employee, even though a lot of these tasks that might happen for the employee onboarding process are across the enterprise in very different systems? So how do you make that easy for them to get through as well?
So is that like a list that the employee would tick through and like would work through themselves, that onboarding? I see. So that's assigned to the employee to be able to do that. Okay.
Yeah, so what happens, it's triggered off of their start date, but it also is bringing in the workflows from, whether it be this is an HR workflow, whether this is an ITSM workflow, and brings it all into one spot so they can interact across the enterprise in a horizontal way, because onboarding is, again, a multi-tenant process. It's not a one vertical in the organization.
Yeah, and in Dion's diagram yesterday, onboarding was one of the biggest things that he was pulling out as being really important. So that's really good. And would the different like HR and IT, would they be able to specify which workflows would need to go into there?
They do, and that's the nature of having it be an extensible and sort of open platform. There's a very valuable piece of communications that sits in here. The communications that tend to sit in here are not one of the global communications. It's really the targeted, where it's personalized to the individual, and you're sending things that might matter to them, whether it's role-based or office. But also the things you want to get outside of email, right? So you talk about the noise. We had a little conversation about this yesterday. The noise in email, all those transactional things, whether it be, if you look at this example, here's an example of 3 different approvals coming from, whether it's ITSM, treasury systems, HR systems, all playing in a unified experience where you can go in and just transact very quickly. But the user experience is the same, even though these are essentially 3 different systems in the background that you never had to go out to do. So it's really trying to make it easier and unify the things that employees need to do to get back to kind of doing the things you paid them for, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good.
Yeah, and just going back to that first question on, the return to work piece,
Mm-hmm.
we talked a little bit about this, and it came up when Neil Morgan spoke yesterday, and also in some of Dion's thing. The organizational aspect, right, of getting to that multi-tenant piece, and this is where we talked about starting small, even with a few apps and growing. But what you're really going to need on that side is a technology like Keely was talking about with the umbrella that supports that and can be multi-tenant. So we're going to see a migration.
Give me one moment. I'm on a web thing. Hold on.
I think you're going to see a migration more, into these employee platforms, as Dion Hincliffe's diagram showed, and ultimately, those 2 things will come together: the organizational structures and the platforms. But this is the intent, and the end goal is to have that umbrella and employee experience layer that can be aggregating all of these things together in a really seamless and easy way to do it.
That's great. That just really brings everything together, and you can see, I mean, all the little apps and surveys thing there look ideal for doing that. Well, it's exactly what was required really over the last few months in the organizations that I've been working with. So with all these shifts, then how is that impacting on the and helping the employees stay connected and informed? I mean, like the intranet, for example, or an intranet, I expect that would be like a big part of the employee experience. But is this an intranet, or what would you call this?
It's not. We kind of tend to call it an intranet amplifier. It can go on anybody's intranet today, so you don't have to go modernize your intranet just to take advantage of these new modern digital capabilities. But we also have other channels, because like I said, your employees aren't in the intranet all the time. They might be on their desktop, they might be mobile. The intranet plays a huge role, but I think that the traditional intranet view needs to evolve to kind of meet these new challenges. Meaning that digital for employees will go way beyond just standard corporate news, knowledge management, and social aspects, typical in the most intranet implementations today. And the single page portal view is going to evolve, and that's kind of where we're seeing a larger role for more pointed and contextual communications and productivity will come together. And this is where intranets are a major player. But also, again, you look at the responses, the question with can HR add something? Can IT add something? That's the flexibility that you need to get to make it multi-tenant, so the experience really grows for the employee. So it's not about the intranet or delivering comms anymore in digital workplace to be effective. You got to bring it all together.
Yeah, so it's very much task-based, and everybody just feeds into whatever's needed at that particular time,
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit, this is where it's not, because I think this was a misconception. It's not just task-based. It's also information-based, knowledge management-based, communication-based. All of those things touch the employee from a full experience. And what you want to do is be able to bring that together in a way that is consistent, and they all play together. And you can kind of see, if you go through, you've got comms from communications from various levels, office to CIO, point of notifications, facilities, where your to-dos are coming from other systems. You've got Assistant here, where you can ask the questions and manage the things like help desk questions that you can just ask for and get the answer. And then ways to see things that are just meaningful, like your pay slip or time off. If I wanted to schedule time off quick, right? It's all about making the employee experience better and making things intuitive and contextual and easy.
Yeah, which is what people are used to outside of the office. So in this sort of era of remote working, we're all sort of miles away from our colleagues. How could people go around start working or improving this digital employee experience?
Yeah, I think it came up yesterday, right? The connectivity piece is interesting. And we all kind of are sitting behind our desk now where you can't spin around in the chair and ask a question. So it's actually put a challenge on some of that institutional knowledge that you might get, or even those conversations you have at the water cooler. So we're starting to see, I don't know if I can share. Yeah, we're starting to see some interesting things. This is an example of this Meet Me app piece, which is, in the lack of me being able to say, I'm going down for coffee, you can create virtual places to do that. So if you put a Zoom link in or a Teams link in, and the notification will go out to the team, say, hey, I'm taking a 15-minute break. Anyone want to join me? Right. And so you can't really do that, stand up in the office and do that anymore. So what are those things you get to be creative with and innovative with to kind of support some of the softer side of work that's sort of missing from where we are sitting at home today?
That's great. That's really neat. So one of my questions then is how do you get the notifications and things that we've looked at in Workgrid? How do you get them into the bar, and how does it get sent to a specific employee? You know, what's happening in the background? There's so many tools that you can get to generate a navigation or a notification. Sorry, how does that feed in?
Yeah, that's our approach and the power of how we built the platform. We built it on an API first premise. So we have a connector framework that you can easily connect notifications that are coming systematically through, as well as some of these things that you're seeing with approvals and various actionable items. We have a catalog that has a lot of these large enterprise pieces like the Oracle system, ServiceNow, Concur, SAP integrations, that all you have to do is kind of drag and drop for the most part and add security credentials, and you get those. And we're continuing to extend that catalog. That's really part of our roadmap, and continuous will always be to continue the amount of integrations that are available. But we also offer the ability for you to build your own connectors, if you will, and deploy. So there's that, we want to put the power in the hands of companies who have the capability to self-service. And I think Maximo was talking about this a little earlier, to be able to, build and extend the platform themselves too. So we offer it a little bit of both sides. There's a lot of out-of-the-box capabilities that are just there. There's connectors that are just there, but also the ability to extend.
Okay, so have you got any case studies or how your customers are approaching this and what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to starting small and growing over time. And this, if you see a lot of our customers are focusing on those high value things that hit first. When you look at things like seeing your pay slip, getting time off, checking your time off, the things you would deep dive into these sort of enterprise systems for pointed things that you can just kind of get and aggregate pretty easy. But we work with customers on the long-term vision, because as you start to integrate app 1 or app 2, you're going to learn and hear from your employees. You're going to build a roadmap to continue to extend. And we like to think of these type of platforms that's experience there as somewhat future-proof, because think of companies in terms of acquisition as an example. You might have 2 HR systems, right? So you might have 2 HR systems that might supply this payslip information here, but the employee doesn't know that. So in the back end, you might eventually be on one, or you might even go to another application. So it's insulating some of that employee experience for the employee and allowing the business to sort of make plug and play decisions on the applications they use in the background. But very broad-based use cases, and happy if anyone wants to reach out to go in a deeper dive. But it's really flexible enough to look at what helps an employee. Again, they go back to some of the digital assistant chatbot type capabilities. It can support HR, can support ITSM queries, it can support anything across the knowledge management and question and answer capacity. It's just a matter of priority and what's most value, and again, continually growing what you've implemented for your employees over time.
Okay. I mean, one of the questions is about Yammer notifications and whether it integrates with Yammer. So I'm assuming it does.
It does. So, I mean, we integrate across the Office 365 suite, and we continue to build out more of those integrations, whether it's Calendar or Yammer or even the Teams aspects. Now, the Yammer one, we integrate in a view of your activity streams. And there's some design components to that as to how you want it to affect your employees, right? When we start to bring in information from across a lot of areas, is really all the stream what you want to present in an employee experience there here, in line with sort of everything else, or is it maybe I'm just being mentioned in something?
Okay.
You really got to think about how you implement those Yammer use cases, but the connectivity is there.
Okay. So there is certainly a lot that organizations have to focus on. what do you think, if it was you, what would you be doing first?
I'd say don't boil the ocean. I think we've said that a little bit. I'll share a little bit of a deck I have here. Let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, you can see that. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so first off, it's, don't boil the ocean, take an agile approach. There's sort of methodology, and I think most people are familiar with that, but I keep going back, harping on, small value, quick, and grow. The journey's not one and done, and you really need a strong voice of the employee strategy as well in place, because we talk about surveys and things like that for getting, understanding the employee and use cases and journeys like that, but you're never going to get more pure feedback from an employee on what the pain point is unless it's in the moment. A lot of the survey stuff is sort of recurring from past, but employees are more apt to let you know when they're in the midst of a problem, what that problem is and how bad it is. So incorporating that into the platform as a real-time feedback tool that allows people to see that to help drive some of that is very important as well. And again, with the don't boil the ocean, it was interesting when we started. This goes back to like the things you don't know. We implemented all these things we knew, we thought, and did all the studies and the user group type things when we implement. And once you started hitting feedback, one of the interesting one was people really cared about what was for lunch, like what's in the cab for lunch. And it wasn't that they cared about what was in the cab for lunch when they got to work. The moment of truth was before they left to go, because then they could decide if they wanted to bring lunch or not. And that was a very unique, and powerful thing for employees. But those are the type of feedback type of things and listening that you got to kind of uncover. And then centralizing communications and information, right? The more you're not having 12 different mobile apps to have to log into to do 12 different types of things that you can bring together, the more efficient and better experience your employees going to have. And then getting things outside of email as much as possible. And we talked about this already, really, about understanding your employees, because that really is critical. You really can't deliver, across the broadness of your employee base without really understanding the diversity and the pieces there. So simplifying your core, this is core do it as well. This is really the core of the experience there. As you saw in what I showed just in the application piece, right? You can go into a concur expense transaction and not even know it's concur, right? It's really about, I don't care. It's an expense transaction. I can approve it. It's about the information and the execution. So simplifying these things by integrating across the enterprise more broadly and having a platform that allows you to do that is important. And make it personalized. This goes back to the platform supports bringing in attributes about your employees that allow you to make very clear targeted communications, or even make things that would operate around suggestions and recommendation engines. So it's not so one size fits all. It's really about me. And what we've seen too is you start to do this in light of sort of the intranet, as we go back to talk about the intranet. When you start to mix the personal things about an employee with the power of the intranet and the global communications, you start to see more penetration in communications. Because if I'm going to the intranet or going to these things because I have actionable things to do and they're very meaningful and personal, I'm more than likely going to be a much bigger consumer of the general communication that are happening in the organization. And then enable self-service as much as possible. You really want to be able to get as much value as quickly as you can out of the box and have it be in the hands of the people closest to the problem, which typically are either the businesses who understand their employees in the aspect of the moment they're trying to solve, or the actually employees on the front line. Some things here we did with help desk tickets for a company was not to have them call, get them off the phone, because you start having these easy answers where you can just interact, reset my password just by asking to reset my password, not having to call the help desk and wait in line and get in a queue. You start to think about the time on call on both sides of the phone and how much that saves. The metrics were 93% cost savings just on each IT help desk transaction. And that's a real bottom line savings. Not only both on what wasteful work your help desk folks might be doing, but the experience for the employee was much easier. And this is, again, the strategy. You really need to think about meeting your employees where they are. The DX is not a one-channel thing anymore. It's not just intranet. It's not just mobile. It's not just desktop. You need to provide the capabilities that are synchronized but also available to meet the worker, how they're working and where they are. And we've seen more of that too. And the promise is we start to see, where we are today with schedules at work and things like that. Even I can speak personally to our company in that, it's not 9 to 5 right now, right? And it may not have been 9 to 5 even before this, but it's even worse now with having to manage homeschooling and various other things that people are being impacted with. Whether it's I might be working from 8 to 11. I need to take 2 hours off because I have to do X or I have to take care of something. In those moments, the flexibility to reach the employee, whether they can still accomplish some things mobile and not actually at home, that's becoming more prominent because the schedules are changing and the way people work are changing. Right. And I think we've kind of gone over most of this. The last one I will call it just a little bit because it came up yesterday, I think, in some of our conversations. You need to kind of set yourself up for success with this. Analytics came up a bunch. But my take on analytics is think about measuring the outcomes too, not just the output. So there's a lot of value in data, but the strategy does need to include sort of, we have adoption metrics, and that's great, and we have click-throughs and those type of things, and that's great to measure. But take the approach also of measuring the intent of what you want to solve for your employee, and measuring that outcome in addition to anything that's analytical from the part of just numbers and system interactions.
Yeah, I think that's really important because it's all about what the employee does, not how long they spend doing things. And I think that's going to come out more and more. There's lots of discussions I'm having with people about productivity, but what is productivity? It's what people actually produce and deliver, not how long they're sitting doing it or not doing it. So that's really useful.
And what's the experience?
I know
in light of
it
that
is,
in light of that productivity, which is sort of the laggard benefit, I might say 4 minutes of transaction was a great experience for the employee.
Yeah, true. I know we've got some questions that have come in chat. There's quite a lot been going on. I know that the Workgrid team have been doing a sterling job in answering people's questions, but we've got some particular ones from Laurie, and so it might be quite good if she could come off chat and just ask them directly, if that's all right with you, Brett.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that? Are you okay with that, Laurie? That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to get my head around this a little bit, coming from a very long-term community management background. So starting with Jive, and we're on LooMaps now, and it's always been that community drive and that the hope that you're bringing people into the intranet to kind of stumble upon things as well. But I just did a survey to our users, and of course what they want is what you're talking about, right? They want the stuff that matters to them, which makes tons of sense. But then how does that work with that idea of the community? Like Keely answered in the chat, like, okay, you're being mentioned, so you'll see that. But what about those conversations that are happening that you don't know about, that you might want to be a part of, and you're not going to be notified about them necessarily? Like, how does community plug into this direct and employee-centric type of communication?
Yeah, if you kind of look at what I was showing, I think, am I still sharing my screen? I can.
Yeah,
you are. Yep.
Get out of this. What I was showing, in this example, right? It doesn't supersede the community motivations you have and your implementation from, that's still there. What it's bringing forefront, right? You talk about Yammer, and I'm going to get a notification if I'm mentioned, or I'm going to get activity in the streams of things I'm interested in. But I think the bigger piece, that even if you look at that in the context of the digital assistant app, the Workgrid implementation, it's married here in this context with the internet and those other community-driven pieces. So if nothing, then we talk about the amplification. I would rather have my employee spending 12x more time here by going to this system 12 times more because of the integrations and the transactions and those type of things than I would having them spend it in 12 other systems.
Right.
And I think that's what drives the traffic, which allows you to have some more, more penetration and driving maybe that will drive them into some of those knowledge management aspects.
Right. So they're coming here and then they're seeing the notification, the little red button that's like, hey, you got some stuff that's related specifically to you. And they kind of dig around in there, but it's not overwhelming the other things. There's still that opportunity to click off of that and be able to engage.
That's
Should
exactly
they
it.
have extra time to do that? There's always the problem too, right? The extra time.
Yeah, but again, when it's transactional and it's part of the daily work, and a lot of the stuff is information they need anyway, or they're transactions they have to do anyway, unify it and bring it to a place that brings it all together, right? Because I'm going to see, and this is a communication piece, and you can kind of see the strategy for communications. What goes into this should be less about global communications and various things, and more about, hey, this is very important. It's something you should sign up for. This is a notification on wellness. This is this is specific to your facility, but it's all driving you to here, and it doesn't supersede what you've done and created from a knowledge management perspective prior. It should, and the opposite of it, it should actually enhance.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just this whole journey, right, that we've been on, and seeing all the tools that are just spreading people out. Obviously, this is a great way to bring them back in. It's just a mind shift and trying to figure out, how these things get implemented going forward and that type of thing.
There might be something about that, when enterprise social networks were first launched and people thought that it was like wasting their time, or should they really be having a conversation about pets or lunch or whatever it was on these things, and it was a bit of a culture change. So maybe there's a similar culture change here where people have got to be like empowered or given the time really to just have a dig around into these sort of conversations that are happening that they might not have been at mentioned or directly included, but they can go and they have a bit of time to go and have a look and see what's happening in the wider workplace.
And to add to that, Nicole, that's a great point. So the governance aspect of this, and it's different by organization, but I think really the most power you get out of it is as democratized as you can get within your governance. Because if you treat managers or even role-based people as communicators to their team, and let them to use this as this type of approach as the way to communicate certain things, whether you just want to do a team-based survey, you're going to continue to drive more and more traffic and more, into the larger piece. So, something to think about that we work with our customers on is, how democratized do you want to allow the capabilities to communicate through this at what levels, right? So there are some thoughts there.
Okay.
Thanks.
Have you got any more questions, Laurie? Is that okay?
No, good. Thank you.
Okay. That's great. So thanks very much, Brett. That was a really great insight and some great sort of screens you've shared in here that can let us really see what the product can do down to that detail, which I think is what people were looking for. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. Great questions.